EA is now on Twitch. Join us Wednesday nights when Alistair reads a bedtime story, and Sunday mornings for a few hours of chill casual gaming, plus interviews, special guests, pickup streams, and more. Visit twitch.tv/EA Podcasts and follow us to be notified when we go live, plus access VODs of past broadcasts.
Escape Pod. Episode 766. The Unrepentant. By Derek Bowden.
Hello, and welcome to Escape Pod, your weekly science fiction podcast. I'm your host this week, Tina Connolly, and I'm here to bring you The Unrepentant by Derek Bowden. This story is original to Escape Pod. Derek Bowden's fiction has appeared in numerous venues, including Escape Pod, Daily SF, and Flash Fiction Online. He is a writer, a software developer, an adventurer, and a graduate of the Clarion West class of 2019. He currently calls Boston his home, although he's lived in 14 cities spanning 4 continents. He is owned by 2 cats and 1 iron-willed daughter. Find him at derekbowden.com and on Twitter as Derek Bowden. Your narrator this week is Ibba Armenkas. Ibba Armenkas is an Inland Empire PBS writer/director and TV host whose COVID-themed educational kids show, Pandemic Playhouse, airs Friday starting January 2021. You can find out more about her, it, and her puppet pals at pandemicplayhouse.tv. Your audio producer this week is Summer Brooks. This story has content notifications for language and violence. So get ready to hang with the Dirtside ghouls, because it's story time.
The Unrepentant by Derek Bowden. Read by Ibba Armenkas. First time I saw her, she was bleeding from her left nostril, with a nightstick jammed under her chin. Officer Vang was twisting her arm all kinds of unnatural behind her gene-hacked body, pressing her face to the exterior window with 4,000 miles of freefall and filth and societal decay on the flip side. The lights in the cramped hallway, Alpha Quadrant, 14th floor of this god-forsaken space elevator, painted her face a rusty orange. She was just another Dirtside ghoul from the rot, weaponized by another shadow corporation that had repurposed Earth's battlegrounds into one big biotech testbed. Officer Vang, an over-muscled knot of a woman that never missed a chance to make an example of one of us refugees, had the ghoul jammed against the hull so hard, her boots were dangling like the gorilla corpses in the town squares back home. She should have been howling in pain. She was laughing. I'm a shrewd woman, a survivor. Should have shuffled right past along with the 70-some other Scrag refugees, all beleaguered and shock-eyed with horror. We weren't 20 hours from processing, another week before we'd reach distribution at the lift's orbital counterweight, and the illusion of freedom had already bled dry. We'd won the lottery, escaped the block, only to be stamped and sorted and packed into this long vertical handoff from one indenture to the next. Maybe that's why I stopped. Something in her laugh said, "Nice try." Sure, we'd spent our respective lives on opposite sides of the war. Ghoul against Scrag, Rot versus Block. Sure, defiance is a cheap substitute for hope, but goddamn did that laugh sound just right, just then. Besides, I had a plan. I'd been tracking Officer Vang since her immigration crew had subdermaled Kuiper ink down my forearm and tossed me into this lift. I had a better shot at seeing my 22nd birthday back on the Dirtside Scrabble than mining the Kuiper belt. Fucking sponsors. Only hope now was to carve my own fate. The ghoul craned her neck hard against Vang's grip, harder than any baseline could. Halfway around, her gaze found mine. Vang cracked her once with a stick, leaned close and licked the blood trail from her scaly temple. The ghoul held my gaze through it all, winked at me even. I was hooked. Patrol? Ma'am? I wasn't one for talking, least of all to the likes of any sir or ma'am. Don't know what came over me. Maybe I can help? My plan on approach had been casual larceny of Officer Vang's badge, here in the Alpha Quadrant surveillance blind spot. No eye contact, no words. So much for that plan. Officer Vang wound back, fuming at the intrusion. Caught sight of me, second-guessed. As they do. I'm soft on the outside. In those leering eyes, Vang was gauging my worth. Finding none. Mind your own, burner girl. The ghoul spat a trail of pidgin foreign words, universal meaning. Vang's mother, other parties. Vang wound back tight as a power coil, nightstick cleaving an arc that would leave a mark that no amount of contempt could laugh away. I touched Vang's elbow. The arc rerouted, accelerated, stopped, a finger's width from my skull. Vang's eyes said, "This better be good." I dug my fingernails into my nape, pried the slender memory thread from under my skin with a trailing clot of blood. The thread, a tightly coiled filigree, scattered light like sparks from a fuse. Its fractals charted my ancestry back to the pre-war. It was a bullet-sized work of art. I'd seen how these off-worlders coveted our relics, seen our lineages dangling from the necks of their officers and priests like hunting trophies. Questions flooded Vang's eyes. Questions about how I got the relic through customs, how much cash it would turn on the gray market, why the hell I'd trade it for this gene-fucked ghoul. Questions about the state of the cameras in Alpha Quadrant. I answered them with a ghost of a smile. Across the hallway, a priest lingered in shadow, his eyes aglitter with greed. Then my hand was empty. The ghoul was a heap at my feet, and Officer Vang was disappearing through the hatch into Beta Quadrant with a parting glare for warning. I'm Jenna. The ghoul held out a hand. I didn't take it. You owe me. A short, sharp laugh. I pretended it was something else, something trite and crude and unwelcome, not the most flawless sound I could remember. I pretended Vang's badge, now tucked deep into my pocket, was the whole reason for this sideshow. The ghoul, Jenna, dragged herself standing, her muscles bunched at the joints like a predatory cat. She had the body of a scout, wiry and small, like me, only rougher at the edges. Through the glass behind her, lights latticed the Pacific coast. An ever-rising tide gnawed at the old arcologies. Cascadia burned. Farther south, where the elevator's trunk obscured the view, an approximation of home. Perpetual drought and ritual slaughter and mercy murder and counting ribs and hiding seeds and cultivating that one last vein of hope that jutted skyward some 60,000 miles, pumping all these refugees up, up, up toward salvation. The view was a reminder. Last thing I needed was a friend. A commotion broke out behind me. Ghouls and scrags, fighting over rations or lineage or breathing room. I took advantage of the racket, turned my back on Jenna and slipped into the surge. I had work to do, and I'd already shortchanged myself on time. Vang would notice her missing badge as soon as her shift ran dry. I hadn't walked over a riverbed of corpses to bleed out in some corporate methane mine. I was maneuvering for better things, and there was no room in my schemes for some dissenting ghoul with a predilection for trouble. The lift pumped higher. Gravity slackened. For the poor saps with stock organs, nausea ratcheted. Didn't faze my modded biome. By the time we deaccelerated into purgatory, altitude had me practically floating down the vestibule into the elevator's lower 8. My palms left a snail's trail of sweat on the rung down into the vacant hall that curved around the elevator's core shaft. 2 lines run the stretch of the elevator, cash line and trash line. Cash line is for transporting salvage off-world. Gold, art, rare earths. The other line is for us. The lifts are built the same, like big-ass caterpillars, 20-some stack cylinders linked by semi-rigid vestibules, sliding up carbon nanotube cables at 200 miles an hour. This close to the core, away from the windows, it was easy to forget all that. Where we'd come from, where we were going. Down here on the 8th floor, the ruddy light said, off limits. But this was the trash line, understaffed and poorly maintained. Surveillance was on the fritz. Officer Vang's patrol was making rounds in the upper 20, keeping some 1,200 refugees in line with equal parts prejudice and pain. And for a scant 20 minutes, the security closet loomed unguarded. Didn't matter much to them. Considering you needed double auth to get in, along with passable subdermal expertise to fire up the deck inside and shave the words Kuiper Inc. off your flesh in exchange for a more survivable assignment. Academy, say, before we reached our destination, where the distribution officers would sort us by arm brand and scatter us across the solar system. I had both. The silence amplified even my scout-savvy steps into a carom of echoes. Halfway to the closet, something clanged from the vestibule. I pressed my sweat-slicked back to the bulkhead. Officer Vang would make an example, catching me here with her stolen badge. Send me right back down to the war, bloody and blacklisted. The vestibule was silent. I waited another 30 count, then hustled to the closet and got to work. Hacked the pre-auth, scanned the stolen badge with 6 minutes to spare, and behold, motherfuckers, the lock read, invalid. I tried again. Invalid again. Another clang from the vestibule. I crammed the badge into my pocket, whirled. A dozen excuses died on my tongue. Savvy. It was Jenna, hanging one-handed from the vestibule's bottom rung, feet dangling. Shoddy stitches half-mooned her temple. And stupid. I showed her my back, tried the badge again. I wouldn't. I heard Jenna drop to the ground behind me. My fingers hovered over the console. Third time alerts patrol. The badge. Stale. Her closeness surprised me. They cycled the codes, found contraband in the gallery, tetrament, dioxides, bleach, raw fixings for an elevator-shaped fire in the sky. Seems there's a saboteur in the ranks. How do you know all this? I'm a good listener. I rolled my eyes. Then a shout, raw and authoritative, carried down the vestibule, and Jenna was dragging me down the radial hall, cramming me into a crawl space between the bulkhead and the lift's outer hull. The view through the glass, out, down, was dizzying. She squeezed into the crawl space next to me. Her sweat scent flooded my nostrils. Boots pounded around the bend. 2, 4, 6. I held my breath, tried to ignore the smell of my fear muddling with hers. The footsteps approached, a low G arrhythmia at odds with the anvil in my chest. Then someone yelled, "All clear?" and the footsteps faded. I breathed. When I glanced up, Jenna was glowering, but not at me. I followed her gaze through the glass. The lift had stopped. Across a girded expanse of space, a semi-permanent low-orbital habitat extended around the elevator's lift cables like a wedding ring, or a shock collar. A continuous sheet of glass comprised the habitat's inward-facing surface, bearing its contents for public display. Purgatory, Jenna said. 100 comatose bodies stood crammed into 100 coffin pods, visors riveted to their faces. Tubes ran up their nostrils, down their throats. Their expressions were serene. Jenna worked her jaw. You know why they're facing us. I had some guesses, offered none. They're a warning. Dirtside, the warmongers called it gibbeting, though down there they detached the heads first. They're alive, broadly speaking. Her words came low and heavy, settling into my clavicle. They're kept in an indefinite feedback loop, reliving their crimes until they repent. How do they even know when? She tapped a finger to her temple. They go digging. I suppressed a shiver. That's it? Then they go free? Long as they've survived enough cycles to match their sentence. Still, she blinked rapidly, so close my modded senses could smell the tears welling, drying. Some never repent. Why the hell not? Jenna's expression was unreadable. Some things are more important than freedom. The thought gave me the chills. I changed the subject. A lot of trouble for a warning. She laughed. Worth every penny. Look at all these burners, all this cheap labor. Sure, we're a PR scam. Sponsors playing hero to boost their stock prices. But that ain't the half of it. We're also a cash scam, a tax write-off, and a 20-year labor contract rolled together. But the scam don't work if they can't keep us in line. So this? She tapped her stitched-up temple. Then she nodded towards Purgatory. And that. She watched me for a long second. Something in her expression softened. The change took me by surprise. I looked away, flustered. I was never much liked back home. My mods, the printless fingers and the jacked senses, said scout, which said sneak and thief and spy. Nobody trusts a spy. Earned me a solo bunk in the trenches, though, so I played it like a bonus. I can convince myself of anything. But Jenna, She was something different. When she looked at me, smiling or scowling, she was sharing a secret. A risky secret, sure, but a secret, just for me. I almost glanced at her forearm, where the subdermal might trace a bas relief against her hardened skin. I almost wanted to know. I almost thought mining the Kuiper Belt might not be so bad, with someone to share a beer with at the end of a double shift. Almost. I skulked into the dorms just as inspections got underway. Officers turned out pockets already purged during immigration, acted surprised at all those empty hands. Officer Vang, flaunting my lineage on her neck chain, singled out 3 men, made a show of them, left them scrag relics in her pocket and scrag blood on her nightstick. Jenna had been right about the saboteur. They were still at large, and we would all suffer for it. Officers halved our rations, tightened our curfew. Sickbay was glutted and unstaffed, save for the priest who traded blessings for smuggled relics. The wails that carried through the halls grew persistent, regulatory. The lift rose. Gravity bled from our bodies, hope from our eyes. Patrol had the lower 8 on lockdown, scuttling any chance for another run at the security closet. My subdermal itched, a reminder, ever present. I'd have carved fresh letters with a scalpel if it would have done the job. Sent me to Flight Academy. 5 cush years in school, and I'd be piloting some spray-tanned VIP's private rig, feet propped up on the dash, whole goddamn solar system at my mercy. But a scalpel wouldn't cut it. I needed that subdermal deck, and quick. Next day in the galley, Jenna passed me by without a glance. I was fixing to put her out of my mind when I found a double pack of rations in my pocket. I thought, dirty thief, and couldn't hide my grin. Not 2 hours later, I found myself peeling her off the floor after a scrag twice her side had used her as a punch ball. She wiped the blood from her jaw and bared her teeth like a sand shark, but she let me patch her up without protest. When I asked what happened, all she said was, I deserved it. That night, Officer Vang took offense to Jenna's smirk, dragged her out of the vaccination line. Jenna muttered something sharp, too quiet for me to hear. Vang put a knee in her gut, another to her half-healed temple. 10 minutes later, she was coughing blood on my sleeve, laughing. I asked her what she'd said to Vang, and she replied, I would have killed me. I laughed despite the blood trickling from her busted stitch, and I almost glanced at her forearm again. Maybe... I shook it off, told Jenna she should be more careful. Then, just like that, she was gone. A day passed with no sign of her. Then, another. I scoped out the dorms, the galley, the clinic. Nothing. I got angry, then worried, then angry about being worried. All this in 30 seconds, staring at the grimy wrapper from a double pack of rations. I found the nearest waste chute, put it out of my mind along with the whole ordeal. I didn't have time for an off-world sentiment. I had to get into that office, fix my trajectory. But where would I go? Was Academy really any better? Didn't matter if I wore a miner's suit or a pilot's stripes. I'd still be a scrag, a refugee, a burner. I'd always be company property. I'd always have the side-eye contempt of these off-worlders. And that beer at the end of that double shift, if I ever scrounged enough to afford it, I'd be sharing it with myself. This is how they break you. Not when they take your freedom or your heritage or your pride. The last thing they come for is your hope. When they see your dead eyes on waking, they know they've won. We crossed geosynchronous on day 5. The nobodies call it the flip. The moment when the ceiling becomes the floor, when the starward centrifugal force finally outmuscles the dirt-side gravity well, when the way down becomes more remote than the way up. The moment when everything changes. I woke with dead eyes. An eye blink later, hope flickered. Scratched into the underside of the upper, soon to be lower, bunk. A note. A surveillance gap. A window. A place and a time. 5 minutes from now. By the time I hit the observation deck, I was bruised and out of breath from the low-G careening sprint. Vang had the lift on partial lockdown, but it was too damn crowded to keep every last straggler from slipping through the cracks. Especially a straggler modded for stealth. I lingered in a knot of shadows around the corner from the security checkpoint as patrol drifted down the hall and out of sight. Next patrol would sweep through in 8 minutes, ceiling walking. Observation was off limits to everyone but the crew and the priest and the occasional officer burning off the middle hours of their beat shifts. Trespassing was unwise. Shadows crossed the V-shaped room. Vacant. I skulked to the row of bent fiber chairs. glanced outside. Through the wall-to-wall window, Earth at 26,000 miles, a big-ass gumball dipped in shadow. From up here, you could almost fool yourself into thinking it was a piece of candy too, or some rich kid's tetherball. Anything but the truth. It was a corpse, bled dry. Home sweet home. Jenna was hanging upside down directly overhead, her legs hooked under a flip-side chair. Had a fresh cut on the side of her neck, the hints of a black eye. I narrowed my eyes. The fuck you been? A half smile, with a touch of bitterness. Miss me? I scoffed. She laughed, and I scoffed some more, now flush with anger. Then she said one word. Solitary. And my skin went cold. By the rumors, solitary meant sensory deprivation. By the haunted look in her eyes, I believed it. Why? I asked. She shrugged. They think I stole someone's badge. I blinked away sudden, hot tears. Don't worry. She mimed the sealing of her lips. Secret's safe. My mouth was bone dry. I tried to formulate an apology. Failed. I had no experience to lean on. Forget it. She glanced at the wall clock. Ready? For what? She straightened her legs, pushed off, drifted down head first. I flinched, too preoccupied with my own guilt to understand. Then I glanced at the clock, remembered. The flip. Jenna drifted down in slow motion. Let go, dumbass. A thrill traveled up from my toes. I let go. Kicked off a little even. It wasn't like me. But I did it, and it was done, and there was no way to reel myself back down. We met at geosynchronous, somewhere between the ceiling and the floor. She grabbed my belt, redirected our inertia, let go. We drifted a slow circle, watched each other sidelong, waiting for something to happen. Maybe something did. Too soon, our orbits started to decay. My gaze strayed to her forearm. I knew I shouldn't look. Was begging for a letdown. But I couldn't help it. My curiosity was a ball of lead in my gut, a bezoar or maybe a sickness. I glanced away, but, of course, she noticed. She took my hand, turned it palm out, pressed my printless fingers to her wrists, guided them along her calloused skin, up to the crook of her elbow. There was no mistaking the letters branded underneath. Europa Corp. I pulled back as if burned. Our orbits decayed some more, as I now knew they would from this moment on. We were due at distribution in 3 days' time. The thing that would be distributed was us. Between Europa and the Kuiper Belt stood some 2 billion miles. Our first dance would be our last. We were already falling. Up had become down too soon. Shadows gouged her eyes. There's another way. Impossible. Officer Vang wouldn't let her guard down again, not with the saboteur on the loose. They cycled the codes. You said it yourself. Officer Vang isn't the only authority on this lift. The silence hung thick. My nerves thrummed with something approaching hope. We were past geosynchronous now. No going back. We met the priest in a windowless call box crammed behind sickbay on the 16th floor. His fingers were manicured and clean as they tapped against the plastic tabletop. His eyes were pale and still, his clergy collar a square puncture wound at his throat. Ghoul relics dangled from his fleshy earlobes. He was smiling. At the center of the table between us, a shiv. It was a murderer's tool, from butt to blade, complete with safety and shunt switch. It would kill with a single thrust. Its nanosealant would leave no trace of a cut. It was our end of the bargain. Jenna had fed me intel as we threaded the crowds towards the call box. Her voice had been low, barely a whisper, laced with excitement. Every turf's got a feud, she'd said. On the trash line, it's patrol versus priest. These motherfuckers loathe each other worse than scrags and ghouls. Always jockeying for power, for profit, for contraband. What she'd meant, I knew, was relics. A savvy off-worlder could make a small fortune from a fist of dirt-side bling. We might too, if they ever gave us access to the gray markets. Not like that would ever happen. Met one of these priests, she'd continued. He's got a subdermal deck stashed on board. Says he'll let us use it. Then, after a knowing look, says he's looking for a scout. I glanced from the priest to the shiv, then back. This was not a scout's weapon. Nobody will miss her. The priest's grin broadened. Least of all you. I suppressed a shiver. Good bet we'd seen equal shares of killing, Jenna and I. But that was war. 80,000 miles up, everything felt different. Officer Vang was cruel and cunning from any angle. But these weren't marching orders. This was exploit, personal gain. This was murder. I tapped the tabletop with a printless finger. This some kind of payback? This is business. His pale cheeks looked damn near ready to crack. He was grinning so hard. I assume you've been appraised of the saboteur situation? I didn't bother to answer. He let out a perfunctory sigh. There is no saboteur. Bullshit, Jenna said. He shrugged. I've outlasted so many of Officer Vang's schemes, they've become transparent. No refugee could have possibly smuggled those chemicals into the lift. Tetrament, bleach, what a joke. Officer Vang planted them to instigate chaos, tighten regulations, kick us all off the line except the refugees and the mandatory security personnel. Consolidate her control. I raised an eyebrow. Won't this make it worse? His grin vanished. The sudden contrast made his lips look disproportionately small, his cheeks skeletal. Without Vang in charge, I will have a far easier time proving the need for clergy on the line. We're performing God's work, after all. He must have spotted my discomfort, added, That's more than anyone can say for Officer Vang. That much was true. Every time I'd crossed paths with Vang, there'd been blood on her nightstick. I narrowed my eyes. Why me? The priest leaned forward an increment. I thought you'd never ask. It was a simple plan. A distraction. A gap in surveillance coverage. A hardware shaft that fed into the comm center, too narrow for most bodies. I didn't have most bodies. I was small, lithe. My mods were tailored for stealth. The fact that the priest knew this put a knot in my gut. The plan called for two. Jenna was louder, stronger. She'd cause the distraction, then keep watch. I was unassuming. I'd finish the job. I felt pressure against my shoulder. Realized only then that Jenna and I were sitting so close we were touching, propping each other up. I nearly pulled away, but the very thought of doing so gave me a chill. So I leaned a little harder. Under the table, she squeezed my thigh. I wasn't used to being squeezed in a way that wouldn't kill me. It felt good. Through the call box porthole, the queue for sickbay snaked around the corner. Over their stooped heads, through the hull window, Vista 9. Last stopover before distribution. Vista 9 was laid out like purgatory, but catered to a different breed of villain. Tourists. Luxury cabins and low-G banquets with a prime view of Earth and the steady stream of lifts fleeing its surface. Along the inner window, prim-suited guests lined up to live blog their encounter with the trash line, as if we were wildebeests in some quaint migration pattern. As if all of our collective hopes weren't founded on the scraps of their tables. All our hopes but one. I ran my thumb down my forearm, hard. Then I pocketed the shiv. For 24 hours, we were honeymooning. With the shiv stashed in the slit of my mattress, anything was possible. We'd have the priest's subdermal deck in hand by distribution day, and the whole solar system would be ours. We were conspiring kids, trading notes in the hall. Each one held a dream. Study mates at academy. Fuck school. Masseuses at the Ganymede resorts. Screw those rich bastards. Cultural specialists at the Museum of Earth on Olympus Mons. I got it. Quality assurance agents at the Callisto Chocolate Factory. She caught my eye at that one, and we both had to stifle our laughs. Officer Vang took her nightstick to the back of Jenna's thighs on account of the disruption. A surprising fury gripped me. If I'd been holding the shiv, I'd have blown the plan and stuck Vang right then and there. Instead, I blew a kiss to Vang's backside. Catch you later. Jenna shrugged off the pain with a grimace, but couldn't hide her limp on the way back to the dorms. She must have seen the fire in my eyes, because when we were close enough to whisper again, she said, Stick to the plan. I forced a nod. She cocked a half grin. Don't tell me you don't like chocolate. Never tried it. She clucked her tongue. Time to fix that. Then, on the eve of distribution, everything went to hell. Jenna and I had been scheming at the time. The shiv sat deep in my pockets. By the time patrol banged their nightsticks against the bunk rails and called us to emergency inspection, there was no time to put it back. Nowhere to hide it without drawing attention. They lined us up in 7 rows of 20, all worn and waif and beaten down. I caught Jenna's eye from across the room, hoped to hell she'd keep her cool. But this time, it was me that Officer Vang targeted. Clamping her cold hand to my jaw, she wrenched my gaze forward, as if she already knew. The priest had rolled over on us. Why else had they dragged us out in the middle of the night, this close to distribution? Why waste their own sweat running inspection twice in one day? I squeezed my palms behind my back to keep them from inching towards my pockets, towards the shiv. Vang looked me up and down, and up again, lip curled back over yellowed teeth. Recognition caught her eye, like glittering dollar signs. Empty your pockets. I slid my hands into my pockets. The cold metal against my palm craved action. This wasn't the time nor the place. 300 eyes on me and a half dozen sticks in easy range, let alone surveillance. But what choice did I have? They were all going to see it, one way or another. Might as well make it count. I eased the shiv from my pocket an inch. 2 inches. 3. Then another officer shouted from down the hall and chaos ensued. Vang started barking orders. These lines over here, those over there. And in the surge of bodies, I lost track of Jenna. Kept sight of Vang, though. An alarm blared. Nightsticks cracked. Through the chatter, I caught fragments of what had happened. Patrol had found another bomb. This time in observation. Another scheme, if the priest was right. Bad news for us, either way. If they were looking for a scapegoat, they'd be lifting prints in observation. My fingerprints are smooth as glass, but sooner or later, they'd find one of Jenna's. And even if they didn't, we were fucked. They were already barking threats about sending the whole goddamn lift dirt side to minimize the risk. By the way the priest had laid it out, they meant it. 1,200 refugees down the backwash to solidify their grip on the relic trade was a no-brainer for Officer Vang and co. They'd ship me back down to the block, Jenna to the rod. Some smog-crusted morning, not long from now, we'd meet again in the gristly stink of battle on opposite sides of the buzzsaw. What a fool I'd been, thinking the flip was some moment of no return. Truth was, they could always send us back. I kept my gaze locked on Officer Vang, even as she hauled herself into the nearby vestibule and shouted at one of her patrolmen to mop up while she alerted command. Then she hoisted herself up and out of sight, toward the comm center. I glanced around. No eyes on me. I slipped through the heaving crowd, around a certain corner and into a maintenance alcove. The dividing wall blocked me from sight, dampened the sound, just like we'd planned it. Overhead, a shaft ascended into darkness, too narrow for most bodies. This wasn't the distraction we'd planned, but it had done the job. Officer Vang was en route to comms, and this shaft would take me straight there. I started to haul myself up. A hand closed around my wrist, dragged me back. I reached for my shiv. Froze. It was Jenna. The haunt was back in her eyes when she said, quiet as death, "Don't go." "The fuck do you mean, don't go?" She held my gaze. "It's not worth it. This was your idea." "I was wrong," she said. "This is someone else's war, just like down below. Different breed of warmonger is all. Ain't our battle." I shrugged. "None of them are." "So why do we keep fighting? Why are we risking our lives for someone else's pay dirt?" Her eyes were searching for something in mine. A shiver overtook me. I almost caved. Then I shook off the gut wrench of doubt. This isn't for them. It's for us. For freedom. For fucking chocolate. Or was that all bullshit? She flinched like I'd slapped her. Chocolate ain't worth dying for. Except it was. So I twisted free and hauled myself up the shaft. The crawl space was too narrow to glance back, and I didn't want to see her expression in any case. So I shimmied deeper into the darkness, around a bend and straight to comms, all flickering with alerts. Officer Vang manned the console, unaware of my presence. Main entrance was to my left, vacant. For now. The shiv chilled my hand. Just one quick thrust, let the nano sealant tidy up. She'd be dead of an electrical surge or cardiac arrest, pending autopsy. By then, we'd be long gone. I targeted a fold in her pleats beneath her fifth rib, just left of the spine. I rushed, lunged, stabbed. Missed. She must have heard me coming, spun and juked. She grabbed my outthrust arm. We scuffled. I took an elbow to the jaw, a jab to the gut. Hardly registered the pain, thanks to the adrenal rush, never mind that I'd be coughing blood in an hour. I ducked under her next punch, raked the shiv across her back. Blood ribboned wildly in the low G. The shiv was a clean tool, but only when wielded with grace. By the time I'd shunted its switch, it was too late for containment. Blood tattooed the console, my clothes, my face. Officer Vang's body drifted to the ground in slow motion. I retreated through the crawl space, down the shaft, into the maintenance alcove. Jenna wiped the gore from my face with a steady hand, but couldn't hide the fear in her eyes. Shouts carried from around the corner, others from the crawl space overhead. By the edge in their voice, they'd found Vang's body. The blood would lead them straight to me. To us. A deep calm overtook me. I felt no fear, but rather a sense of inevitability and something more. As if this was all happening to someone else. As if it had already happened. Once, twice, 100 times. I knew how this would all end. And I was glad. I squeezed Jenna's hand, whispered an apology. Then I hauled her around the corner and shoved her into the press of bodies. She was too shocked to fight the flow of the crowd. Within seconds, she was gone. Only then did I retreat into the alcove. With bloody shiv in hand, I waited for the guards to come. Gravity tugs at my molars. My brain presses against my skull. It's hot as hell, shockingly dark. The only sensation that roots me to reality is the blood between my fingers. From the darkness, a disembodied voice raises a question. Although I cannot make sense of its context, I know it's not the first time it has been asked. I know it will not be the last. I force my eyelids open. Directly in front of me, a sheet of glass, an orbital station, a space elevator, parked. Throngs of refugees huddle inside the lift. They stare, slack-jawed, through the window. I catch sight of a wiry pair sharing a sidelong glance. The shorter of the two tends to the other, who is bleeding from her neck. They are oblivious to the crowd. In their eyes, conspiracy, or love, if there's a difference. I want to scream, in triumph or in warning, but I have no voice. Tubes run down my throat, my nostrils. Straps prevent me from turning my head to see the others at my side. The lift surges starward, out of sight. My eyes flutter shut. The metallic scent of blood on my hands serves as a reminder of what I have done. What I'll do again and again until I repent. I've already survived enough cycles. My atrophied muscles can attest to it. All I need to do is answer the question. And yet, some never repent. Some things are more important than freedom. Now, I believe it. I've traded my freedom for a lie. A lie I've told myself enough times that it has become true. A lie that would doubtless come to light under interrogation, but that, as long as I am here, living it over and over again, is never questioned. Why would it be? All the details add up. The lift, the flip, the priest. The condemning trail of blood. These are my memories, and the vast sum of them are verifiably true. No one would notice, would even suspect, a single trivial revision, a hot swap of who did what on the eve of distribution. For example, which one of us navigated a certain crawl space? Which one of us said, "Don't go"? Which one of us went anyway? Yes, I was once a scout. Yes, I am small and lithe. But so is she. And now she is on Europa, and I am here. Because I am here. Because every time they prod my brain, it's me they see in that comm center instead of her. Killing for reasons they'll never take the time to understand. The questioning relents. The discomfort bleeds away. The gravity, the pressure, the knowing. A new sound fills my ears. It is hoarse, strained, flawless. A ghoul, laughing. There she is now, across the cramped hallway of Alpha Quadrant, a nightstick jammed under her chin. I know I should keep my head down, shuffle along, mind my own. But goddamn, does that laugh sound just right.
About this story, Derek says, I wrote this story huddled in the corner of Seattle Coffee House midway through the 2019 Clarion West workshop, severely underslept and overcaffeinated. I nicknamed it Love in a Space Elevator. The idea started out largely incoherent, a vague image in my mind from a song I'd recently heard called Coop Island Blues. I wanted to write a story about emigration and criminal injustice and love, but the first draft ended up largely incoherent. It was only through the insights of my Clarion West cohorts that I was able to rewrite it, and then rewrite it again, until I finally got it right. Yet another reminder to myself that writing is 1% inspiration and 99% hard fucking work. And about the story, I say, I really like when you reach the end of a story and it recasts the whole beginning in a different light. So then you read back through, looking at the hints and misdirects that led you down the path you took, reading it for the other path to see where that might go. One of the things I particularly like is the innocent-sounding line near the beginning, after our ostensible protagonist sees Jenna. The narration says, "Maybe that's why I stopped." And after that, we slide more thoroughly into the protagonist's POV, like she reasons and chooses with authority. But I feel like the moment of that meeting, there were still unknowns. Why did the girl who was walking stop to save the girl who was trapped? If Jenna is the one telling the story, then maybe this is still one bit she will never know, but she will keep wiggling at it like a loose tooth. Another thing I like is that whichever way you read the story, you can see character change for our two main characters. If our unnamed protagonist is truly the one who she says she is from the beginning, then by the end she has learned that some things are more important than freedom. But if we revise that, if Jenna is the one telling the story, then she too has learned something, because she has learned to add love to that list. The Escape Pod's 15th anniversary anthology is out now. The order links are on the landing page at escapepod.org/year15. Please share when you see reviews. We love receiving them. Absolutely delighted to tell you that associate editor pay goal we've been telling you about, we have partially reached it. Which means that we are still working to get it fully 100% funded, but in the meantime, we are at the point of being able to pay something to every single member of the Escape Artist team. This goal has been important to us for a long time, and we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for helping us work toward this. Anyone with an Amazon Prime account can now support Escape Artist for free by subscribing to our Twitch channel. Find a complete walkthrough at escapeartist.net/Twitch. Escape Pod is a production of Escape Artist Inc. and is brought to you with Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license. Don't change it. Don't sell it. Please go forth and share it. I mean, stay in your own home, but go forth and share it. How do you share it, you ask? Well, in addition to your social media of choice, consider rating and or reviewing us on podcast listening sites such as Apple Podcasts or Spotify. More reviews makes for more discoverability, makes for more Escape Pod for you. Escape Pod relies on the generous donations of listeners exactly like you, so if you enjoyed our story this week, then consider going to escapepod.org or patreon.com/EAPodcasts and casting your vote for more stories that carve their own fate. Our opening and closing music is by Daikaiju at daikaiju.org. And our closing quotation this week is from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who said, "There is nothing more deceptive than an obvious fact." Thanks for listening, and have fun.